WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment Inc., formerly known as the World Wrestling Federation, WWF, the lead manufacturer of sports entertainment. We'll say that one again, shall we? Introduction. This paper aims to present an argument for the existence of a psychological mechanism tentatively termed the violence-seeking impulse, VSI. Divided into three parts, the paper examines different theories around how the VSI may be recognised and what its main expressions are. Through this paper, the arguments are voiced for why humans gain enjoyment out of staged violence. The display of violence would not be acceptable in society outside the spheres of sports and staged entertainment. Two threads of the main argument are focused on. In part 1, the first, chapters 1 and 2, is that the violence-seeking impulse actually exists and has existed for thousands of years. That this violence-seeking impulse still affects the modern Western world, and that there have been examples of its past display through the development of sport at the Olympics, the excitement of the Roman gladiators, and blood sports like Spanish bullfighting. The author tackles such questions as what psychological evidence is there for the existence of the VSI as a motivational force in human behaviour, and how has history and culture shaped and moulded the VSI and its expression. By chapter 3 we have two conclusions. The VSI mainly expresses itself in an acceptable way through violent sport, the horror genre and violent video games, and the expression is curbed by morality. The second thread, chapter 3, uncovers the roots of the morality that curbs the VSI expression and the ways in which we interpret symbolism. This is done by examining views taken by Friedrich Nietzsche, Michel Foucault, Georges Bataille, Erving Goffman and Sigmund Freud. From these, a conclusion is drawn that doing what is socially unacceptable in an acceptable way through one of the mentioned mediums may act as an escapist event for participants and watchers, whereby they can receive a form of ecstasy by gratifying the VSI. Part 2 looks specifically at the expressions of the VSI. First, the display of violence through professional wrestling and sports entertainment. Throughout the paper, and drawing significance in the conclusion, will be the hypothesis that, at present, sports entertainment is the leading outlet for the VSI. That this choreographed form of simulated violence hides under the umbrella of sport in order to be acceptable. This is of great importance when thinking of the moral consequences of staged, non-competitive violence. Relevant theories from Atkinson and Barths are influential in this area. The symbolism covered in chapter 3 is used to demonstrate how professional wrestling may satisfy the VSI. This prompts a brief look at masculinity within the sports entertainment industry, where men are portrayed as being vessels of power, being dominant, and where using violence and appearing tough is a vital part of their image. The paper moves on to study briefly cinematic horror as gratification for the VSI. In chapter 5 there is consideration of whether these outlets of aggression are healthy, or whether watching staged violence may lead to carrying out violent behaviour. Does fantasy act cathartically, or does it increase the risk of acting the fantasy out? This leads to analysis of the hostility catharsis. At this point, an attempt is made to identify a possible personality trait linked to the extreme portrayal of the VSI. An analysis will follow of thrill-seeker psychology, where the author intends to show possible personality types predisposed to acting on the impulse in a tolerated form. In part 3, the paper concludes by examining how society may appear to be hypocritical by sometimes applauding real violence, whilst maintaining violence as being morally unacceptable. Redemptive violence is considered here. The paper ends by highlighting the main points of the argument, along with the conclusions drawn at each level. The argument concludes that the VSI does exist, that it is curbed by the morality of the day, and that its main expressions are sport, especially sports entertainment and professional wrestling, the horror genre, and violent video games. It is suggested that VSI gratification is based on the interpretation of symbolism, that VSI gratification may be a pleasurable, escapist, cathartic event, and finally that society is hypocritical in how its moral code relates to the expression of violence, real or otherwise. Key definitions. Violence-seeking impulse, known throughout also as VSI, an ancient primary drive dealing with protection and hunting for food, that one gratifies in the modern age by participating in or watching dangerous or mock-dangerous sport, the horror genre and violent video games. The feeling that leads people to enjoy violence and its portrayal or graphic and often frightening scenes. WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment Inc., formerly known as the WWF, the World Wrestling Federation, the lead manufacturer of sports entertainment. The rush, feeling associated to gratifying the VSI, attained in combination with factors such as risk, excitement, danger and obsession. Mock dangerous sport. Sports that simulate violent acts but require little skill, training for participants. This includes paintball but excludes professional wrestling, which is not a sport.